listening to the Multifamily Podcast, brought to you by Ron Ruiz and Martin Canchola, co-founders of Apartment SEO, a premier Google agency, where we discuss current multifamily and real estate trends, apartment marketing strategies, and speak with some of the most influential thought leaders shaping the multifamily industry today.
Welcome to the Multifamily Podcast with Ronn and Martin, powered by ApartmentSEO.com. We are here to explore the innovators, creators, and leaders shaping the future of multifamily real estate. And today, we're talking with somebody who's earned the nickname, the King of Budgeting, somebody I personally met at Blueprint Technology in Vegas. He's logged more than 10,000 hours building and managing multifamily budgets, and now he's helping operators do it in a fraction of the time through his company, Vizibly.io. We first met him at Blueprint Real Estate Technology Conference, and his story from multifamily operations to tech founder to global entrepreneur really stuck with us. Briant Cárcamo, welcome to the Multifamily Podcast.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
What's up, Brian? So excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Bummed I didn't get to hear about or meet you personally at Blueprint, but super excited for me and our audience to get to know a little bit more about you. So great to have you here. Let's start with your journey. Let's see, how did you go from being deep in the trenches of the luxurious world of multifamily budgeting to founding Vizibly and obviously disrupting the entire process?
Yeah, that is a super long story. I'll break it down into little pieces. Yeah, so I spent about 10 years in multifamily. I was director of revenue management at a company called Steadfast. We grew a portfolio from about 5,000 to 30,000 units. And honestly, I was kind of like the guy who was in charge of the spreadsheets. I was the spreadsheet guy, at the company. And so one year they're like, hey, why don't you, you always need one who can basically spreadsheet anything out. And when I was there, one year they said, hey, you're pretty good at Excel. Do you want to just run our budgeting process? And so I was like, sure, I love financial modeling. Let's do it. But really quickly, what I saw was that when the budgets kind of grew from having just 20, 30 budgets, 200, this was just a complete impossible task. And so that's really kind of what prompted me to think that maybe there could be just a better way to, deliver something to the multifamily industry in the form of a simpler way to do budgets and forecasts. And so at the beginning, honestly, it was just pure survival. I just need to survive through budget season. And then as I got better and better at budgeting, I started building little automations and templates that help me save time in the budgeting process. And ultimately, all of those components became the prototype for what Vizibly became today.
And it's so funny, when you mentioned Steadfast, I saw Ron's eyes perk up as well, because a little backstory, Steadfast, definitely a really dear client that we hold closely to our hearts, because they were one of our first clients in the beginning, giving us a chance for Google Ads. And really, when we first were making our mark in the industry, they were the ones that, were behind us as well during that time. So
yeah, they were coming out when we were growing. And Brian, you probably helped make sure that there was money in the budget for us. So thank you.
I'm sure we budgeted for it. Yeah. Yeah. I think what's great about multifamily is it feels like it's the world's largest high school, and when you spend enough time at a place, the network is so amazing. I still talk to a bunch of people. I just texted a few this morning too on, dumb things that you remember right from the multifamily days. That's what's so great about the industry.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, it's such a relatable story for everyone in the industry. Every operator knows the pain of those endless Excel sheets and late nights during budget season. What was the moment you realized there had to be a better way?
That is a great question. There's a couple different angles to budgeting and ways that we can think about it. For me, as a director of revenue management, call it a mid-level executive, right, who was thinking about this at the portfolio level, I just felt really constrained with being able to make good decisions, as it related to the business. My job was to maximize the revenue, the income that came into the properties, But I remember that in 2020, when we had COVID, I think in 1 week when we had the lockdown, we basically lost 90% of our leads basically overnight. And so there I am, with all the executives, and we're trying to come up with ways to hey, what are we gonna do about the renewals, or what are we gonna do about occupancy? And I basically had no way to know what GPR was going to be next month. Hey, if we like make all these like dramatic changes to the portfolio, like how's that actually going to impact the bottom line? Are we going to meet the investment returns? And it was just really challenging because that meant I had to spend, 200, 300 hours trying to model the whole portfolio by myself. And I just thought, man, I just really need power tools, to be able to do this. And when I think about kind of some of our customers that have 5,000, 7, 10,000 units, a lot of the folks doing budgeting, like these are like the presidents, right, of the management company. They're the ones that need to like get all the budgets out. And so that can be really challenging for executives who have to like run the business. They have to like be in the weeds with like all the things that are happening in the property, and they just don't have enough tools, right, to be able to make these decisions about like financial performance, which is what this whole deal is about. This whole deal is about making sure that the assets perform from a financial perspective. And I just thought there just have to be better tools that help executives to do that. And then, on the management side, what I was noticing was that I would do all this work to come up with these like really fancy financial models. And then I show it to a manager, like who's like the first time doing a budget. And it's like, it was really challenging to catch them up. And because, they're doing all kinds of other things, they don't get enough reps to get really good at budgeting. And so we thought, man, there has to be like a way to build like a TurboTax for budgeting where managers can go in, they just follow a workflow, right? And they can get their budget done. And so we try to blend the two, right? Of both like the executive investment financial outcomes, which can be a little scary for the managers sometimes, right? Who aren't in those kind of positions, but then also make it like easy for managers because look, budgeting is a team effort. Everyone's making huge sacrifices between August and December. That's missed birthdays, that's missed like holidays, events, right? And so we want to make sure that the experience is an important one because it's part of your business plan, right? And things that need to get produced for the properties, but it can't take up your whole life the way that it was taking up for me when I was in multifamily.
That's huge. A lot. I mean, you're kind of giving me a little bit of PTSD from my yesteryear when I started in multifamily and leasing, ultimately made it into management. And I remember the first time I was responsible for writing my first budget as a manager, on-site manager. The second company I worked for, thank God, they had a great budget boot camp, and it was very immersive. And then we'd go to the corporate office and spend like 3 long days and nights, into the midnight plus hour. And they would just infiltrate us with this information and how to best manage. And to be honest with you, to this day, I speak on, including my own family, like, how did you know how to run a business, right? I actually reference those days and the power of budgeting and of what I do today and how I run the company for the last 12 years, right? So it's amazing that you have this tool to really help people understand it's a huge ask, right? These are multi-million-dollar assets.
Yeah, that's right. I think for me, it was about increasing the financial and business acumen of the whole team, right? And ultimately, if everyone can think really critically about financial performance, what's the actual strategy that's going to deliver this? This just has so many downstream effects, both in like career, but also personal life as well.
No, 100%. Yeah, I think I became I became a better manager of my own money, once I realized the ebb and flow of it all. So clearly, once you had this idea, how did you go from that concept? Obviously, it was a working concept for you to creating a company. What were some of the biggest hurdles you faced during that multifamily pain point and make it into a scalable tech product that it is today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the idea really came out of necessity. I had just had a baby. I had a 1-year-old when I was thinking about starting Vizibly, and I thought, man, there just has to be a way for me to get out of budget nightmares, in the next couple of years. And I am really passionate about budgeting. It was something that I really enjoyed, and I like thinking about all the different things that go into a good budget process and what goes into the budget. And so the first thing that I did was I wanted to call other property managers. So I called 100 property managers on LinkedIn. Can I get 15 minutes? I talked to CFOs, regionals, asset managers, really try to get a 360-degree view of what is the worst part about your budget season. Is this a challenge? Am I the only one who's crazy? So there's definitely a moment I think that any founder needs to go through and figure out whether they think there's going to be a market for this. And so after I sort of got all of that feedback, the number one thing that everyone talked about was how long the budget process took. The budget process is taking between August and December. Sometimes it's late. And so we really started to break down what are the different components that make the budget process just too long for folks to get through. And this is where we really broke out the different users. You've got folks like me who are in charge of the data, making sure it syncs with the PMS, right? Bringing all the financial unit type level information, basically the building blocks of what makes a good, right? Accurate budget and expense forecast, right? A revenue forecast for the properties. And so that was the one hurdle of like, how are we actually going to like integrate with all the PMSs and bring this data in? The second hurdle was, let's make a financial model in the cloud. And this is where a lot of UI work went in, because we didn't want to just, replace a spreadsheet. That seemed like the really easy target of like, oh, let's just make Excel in the cloud. And that wasn't really what we were trying to do. We were really trying to build a workflow that allowed people to get through the budget process, and the power tools for people like me to be able to just set this up for the whole portfolio and just have everything kind of like pre-filled out, right? And so it was really identifying kind of those components that initially got that started. And then later on, we started tackling kind of other things like, how do I get through an approvals process? Like, how do people go and comment and edit inside of Vizibly? And over time, this is how it started going. I would say that was on the product side. The other aspect is really from a real estate perspective. Like, I had to learn how to build software, and that was something that I'd never done before. And so it's about talking to developers, figuring out what's the right tech stack. And so in just a couple of months, it was pretty intensive learning on how to build, develop a product, market it, and sell it to other folks. And so that summer, I think I remember I quit my job in May. And that summer, I went to NAA. I had like a tiny little booth all the way in the back, shaking hands, kissing babies. Anyone that will talk to me, yeah, but you got to hustle and grind, to do that.
We remember those early days too, Ron, right?
That's a beautiful story. Yeah. Yeah. And to that end, yeah, when you add the tech element, right? Like to create the wireframe for what you have in your head and what is the need and the pain point out there. So kudos to you, because that definitely takes a whole nother, I've had to bring on that element to my own life too. Understanding that. Because of course I think everything can get done in 30 days on a tech side.
There's a lot of negotiation. There's like what you wanted, and then there's like the V1 of it, which barely hangs in there, barely does the thing. Yeah, everything has to be built from scratch.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So let's start digging into the power of Vizibly, really simplifying the budgeting grind. For someone hearing about this for the first time, what exactly does it do, and how does it simplify the budgeting process for multifamily teams?
So Vizibly centralizes and automates everything that you need to do in your budgeting process. And so it has basically three components. One is bringing all the data from the property management system, and then we calculate, all the main things you would need for revenue forecasting. So things like average trade out, occupancy, rents, everything gets configured. And so we completely eliminate having to create any templates or like manage all those like backend functions just to get to the starting line. That already saves a ton of time for folks. Then the second component is making it very easy for all these different users that are going to be in it, right? From the managers to regionals, corporate folks have to do this at different scales, at a corporate level, and then also at the property specific level. We just provide a very simple and clean UI that allows them to kind of go through a workflow and actually do the data entry. And then the third piece is really about getting through an approvals process, right? You do all this work and now you got to go sell the story. Like if you're in third-party property management, it's not enough that, yeah, hey, like my budget's good, trust me, like hit approve. That's not how it works, right? Every asset manager, especially when there's a down economy, right? Especially if you're in a market where you've got like every lease up coming up is like your neighbor discounting everything. They're going to go after you for every nickel and dime, right? As they should. These are the asset managers. And so you need to have a really compelling story that just puts it all together for you. And so we also have a whole executive summary that just writes out the exact business plan that you would need to go and sell this to the asset managers. And this actually has a benefit also internally because it's written out in plain English. This is something that you can give to your teams that they can now operationalize the budget, because it's not enough to just write a budget. People actually have to go and execute on the strategy. And so we just put all of these pieces together for them in a nice, easy deliverable that you can use internally and externally to get through budget season as quickly and efficiently as possible.
That's huge. And so you mentioned obviously how Vizibly gives people time back in their over a year. Can you help unpack that? I'm personally interested in seeing like at what layers are you giving time back? What positions? Obviously how much time are teams really saving? And then what does it mean for productivity or even mental health during the budget season? I chuckled.
That's a
We
big
used to do budget survival kits back in the day.
Yes, this is a big topic, the mental
Yeah.
health aspect. Yeah, definitely. The interesting part about this is that if you ask anyone, who's not using Visibly, and you ask them, how much time does your budgeting process take? No one can give you an answer because everyone knows that it's really challenging and that a lot of time gets spent, but you actually don't have like a firm number because most folks don't track this. They just know that life sucks between August and December. And so one of the things that we implemented with Visibly is that we actually do user tracking inside of the application. And so we can track which page they're on, which account they got stuck on, did they spend time in revenue, expenses. And so we actually provide like a ton of very detailed information for management companies. And we calculate exactly how long their budget process takes, which really benefits them moving forward because now they can figure out where the folks are getting stuck, where there's more training that can happen. And that's how we actually get through improving the budget process for our customers today. And so we publish all of those findings in on a website called State of Multifamily Budget, stateofbudgeting25.com. And we actually compile everything for all of our customers. And so what we saw last year, for example, was that it takes about 13 hours on average per user to get through budget season. The managers take about 10 hours. The regional managers take about 24 hours, which is about 3 hours per property. And that's just because they have more properties, and so they're a little bit longer. And what was really interesting about the data is that one is 10 hours is actually not a lot of time if you really think about how long it would take you to get through a budget, but we can actually track when they work. And so this has the benefit for us because we get to improve the application, right? And we can see what pages they're on. But we actually see that what happens is about half the time gets accrued during the budget boot camp. So when everyone's together on, right, and you're cranking this out, about 5 hours get accrued. Then they basically stop working on it for like 30 days. And then right before it's due, this is when all the budget work gets done, right? And so by having these insights into all these behaviors that the users are going through in budget season, we've got a very, very deep knowledge and insight into what makes a successful budgeting process.
I love that. Now, and because our industry is time is everything, and sometimes burnout can be real. How does Visibly not only speed up budgeting, but also empower the on-site and corporate teams to make better financial decisions throughout the year?
Yeah, that's the golden nugget here, right? How do we actually get the budgets to get operationalized and then make decisions around what the financial forecast is showing? And so one of the cool things about Visibly is that the budget doesn't die in a folder once it's approved. So one of the things that our users can do is they can actually go and refresh the actuals after budget season is done, and that creates a new projection. This is what we call the reforecast. And so you can compare that to actuals. You can test different scenarios, throughout the year. Maybe you didn't get the rents that you thought you were going to get, right? And you need to like recast everything just to see whether you're going to meet the NOI targets that you're going to do. By turning budgeting into not just a once a year event, but actually like a living strategy, this is actually something that supports decision making, not just documentation.
That is huge. I was going to ask if there was a reforecasting piece to it and how it could, work along month after month, not just the initial budget process.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I would say like most folks have a challenge with the reforecast because the mechanics of getting the data in is too hard, right? It's just impossible. No one's going to spend hundreds of hours when this is not your main job. Like the managers have a whole job, right? The regionals have a whole job. They can barely keep up with like variance reporting and talking to customers and making sure they're happy. And so this is where you really need power tools, especially at the corporate level, to have a whole financial planning and analysis team without having to hire all the labor for it.
I think that, yeah, in again, I'm PTSD, but in remembering that former life, there was always that a disconnect too on the reforecast because, of course, the higher senior level still wants to achieve what wasn't achieved, right? And then the reality, especially particularly on-site or regional level, who knows just the reality of the market, may beg to differ. So it would be cool to have those financial tools, as you mentioned, to kind of be that middleman.
And budgeting has so many Achilles heels, right? All you need is, one manager to quit their job, and now the regional's the manager, right? Oh, yeah. And then you've got the maintenance person who also needs to get replaced, and suddenly like your OpEx is out of control, and then the lease up opens next door, and suddenly like you're underwater needing to get out. And so this is where financial planning tools help just recast what is going to happen.
100%. I mean, that happens in real life to this day. I have clients that are like, oh yeah, I have to write 6 budgets and 3 of them, I have no manager. So they're like literally filling in the gaps. And some of these properties are newer to the portfolio, blah, blah, blah. All the, all the inherent pain points.
All the issues. And the other thing that's happening now is because of all the financing that happened a couple of years ago and the rates shooting up, from an asset management perspective, this is why there's a ton of pressure on property managers today, right? Because the deals are potentially going to be underwater. There's not an exit opportunity through a refi. The markets are still very tight and not enough transaction volume is happening, even though it's sort of like thawing a little bit. And so now is when you want to be extra tactical, when you really need to find every dollar and cent into the property. Else you got to go do capital calls, and this is not good for anyone's business to go do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm a investor as well. And so thank God we haven't had any capital calls. I know some of my contemporaries that have other funds, they have, and I'm like, thank God we haven't, but so it affects people.
Yeah, and the property managers too, because a lot of times property managers can only do so much to get to an NOI number, right? And what we also find is that, there should be a healthy tension between property managers and asset managers, when it comes to the performance of the property. But sometimes property managers are also set up to fail, especially if they're not going to meet like certain loan covenants or debt requirements. And so the budget should also be a way for property managers to document what they think is going to be the best strategy moving forward, right? And so that way, if things hit the fan, right, they have something to back it up to say, look, like there's only so much we can do from like a revenue and expense, level. They're not in charge of like the debt on the deal, right? And so this is why I think having more like financial planning tools and transparency just benefits the ecosystem throughout.
Yeah, to your point a second ago, yeah, I think most of the world, let alone specifically multifamily, got caught, in a bad place when they realized that the debt was a lot more expensive, interest rates were rising, and we even felt it on the marketing side because clearly, speaking of budgets, people had to cut back, right? And then obviously,
that's right,
the traffic to try to lease up so that way they didn't have too much, loss.
Yeah. And so imagine, Ron, they come to you and they say, hey, we need $1 million more from all the investors, but we don't actually know if any of the things we're going to do will make a difference because we can't predict the NOI in the next 12 months. Come on, who's going to do that?
Or how long, the pain's going to be there.
That's right.
So switching gears a little bit, this is a really fun part. That I found out about you, little fun fact, but you are literally running a US-based startup while living internationally. So, and even managing a farm is what I heard. So can you tell us about that lifestyle? I'm sure Martin truly it was probably the most excited he got probably from that part because he aligns with that. But tell us what influenced you and has it influenced how you lead, I guess, from another country?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, we decided to try living abroad, and we wanted to live in like a small community. And so we found a small like mountain community here in the countryside of Panama. And so we've got about 4 acres. We wanted to like maybe grow some food and just like get more connected with nature and different kind of lifestyle than, let's say, like suburban American life. And so it's been definitely a transition. I'd say that a lot of the moving here in Panama has been about kind of getting balance and perspective. You're a business owner, Ron. You got to work a lot. Yeah, certainly the startup takes up a ton of time, right? But it's always good to have a place where you can get more balance with sort of the things that really matter. And so now that I've got, that I'm trying basically to grow food, have some animals, have a horse, it's like these are all things that now I'm working a lot more with my hands. And I think really what it's helped me do is just be more grounded, be more grounded in the reality of like what life is about. Because when you look at budgets, these are budgets that generate, right, millions and millions of dollars, right? These are like billions, trillions of dollars in real estate, right, that property managers manage. But we were trying to get back to the basics too, which is like living a nice, comfortable life. That's what everyone wants, especially in the multifamily industry as providers of housing.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a lot more intentional too with your time, right? Time spent on the business during US business hours and, time if you travel out back to the States, making those important meetings, connections, so you can get the farm. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Also, no, you go, Mark.
I was just saying, no, when you were showing me some of the pictures of or videos of your dancing horses and some of the things you were looking at, I was like, oh my God, it looks like such a fun life out there.
It definitely makes me appreciate time more. Like you're just more patient things take a long time to develop. All things that matter and are valuable take time to do. And so you got to build it. Sometimes it rains and like there goes all the cilantro. That's how it goes out here, and so this is why I think it's just made me have more perspective on the business. Like, yeah, we want this to explode and be big, but also things take time. And so have a little patience.
Amazing. It really reflects a modern way of working. And with that in mind, how do you balance leading a fast-growing tech company with maintaining that slower, more intentional pace of life abroad?
For me, it's really about catching a rhythm. It's like working out. It's like you need just the reps to catch a rhythm in your work. For me, what I try to do is I try to work in like just very deep, focused bursts and then like completely unplug. And I think as a growing startup, you really begin by working in the business, right? Like I'm doing customer success, I'm doing sales, like I'm doing operations. My fingerprints are all over Vizibly today, right? And then over time, as your business scales and grows, then now what you're trying to do is to work more on the business strategically. Are we building the right product? Like, are we servicing the customers in the right way? And so I think those are the things that I try to balance, just figuring out where I can sort of really unblock like my team members so that they can do their best work, but then also continually deliver a certain level of service that like your customers know and love, right? And I think one of the best things about being small, when we were smaller, certainly, was just like all the relationships you form with the folks. Like I knew every one of my customers. I knew all the regional managers. I went to all the budget boot camps. It's like I know them personally. I still answer the chats. They still have my phone, And so if it's like 11 o'clock and we got to get a budget out, like we're in it with them. So that's been, I think, been the best part about being part of like a growing company, because the best part is having happy customers. Yeah, it's so hard to get happy customers at the beginning, and so once they're happy, I feel like life is good. And now I think the stuff that I'm really thinking about is more long term. Okay, like how does this fit in the wider market? What are the real needs of the multifamily industry that we can really go and tackle? And so I'm just having fun. I think being kind of in this in between stage, from startup to scale up.
That's huge. I've said that you took the words from my mouth. I say it often is in the startup world, right? You go from working in the business to on the business. And I think that was an interesting perspective for me when I had that shift, had the luxury, I should say, of that shift. A luxury, I say, because I had the right people in place to allow me to step back a little bit on the operation side and really just start building us. And, that takes an evolution. So I applaud you that you know that already. And it does take a true look within on what is the best use of your time, right? Sometimes you don't need to jump in like I do all the time, right? Martin does as well. And then there's times where I'm like, okay, now I could have a little bit of freedom to just really dive in and focus on building the business even higher than what we thought. So good job.
Well, and in that sense, I really try to resist automation where it doesn't make sense. So for example, like we do all the chat support through the app so they can chat with us during budget season. What's GPR loss release? And so we help them through the application, right? And one of the questions I always get is like, hey, is this automated? Like, is this a chat bot or is this for real you, on the chat? And like, I'm not ready to let that go. Like, I want to stay as close as possible to the customer right now, because this is what makes Vizibly different. This is it's not like a help desk ticket and then you got to wait 48 hours. Like the benefit of working with us now, while we're growing, is that this is the kind of access that you get, with us. And we really care about, budgets and forecasts.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you find like the distance? Obviously, does it give you a unique perspective? Maybe helping see how the US multifamily industry is from a different angle, a fresh angle?
There's definitely some culture shock. One of the differences between Panama and the US is that we don't have mail. So for example, like my house is the house behind the bank on the street with no exit, right? And so what that means is that there's no mail and there's no Amazon. Yeah, you can get it shipped in. It's hard. It's not worth it, right? And so what a lot of folks do is they go to the mall. Like they go to the mall, they go shopping, and I really sort of got in a better sense of all the different components that build up a community, right? Like people used to go to the mall and this is like a big part of their social life. And I feel like some of those things have really slowed down in the US because now you can just live online, basically. You can be in your house, the food will get there, the groceries, right? Like all the amenities basically come to your house. And in the multifamily industry, like the business has had to evolve, right? Like it's not just about your apartment. It's like this whole sense of communities because people are in their apartments a lot longer. And so that's something I think I've really appreciated how many amenities and services the multifamily industry provides to people today, right? And how complex that is from a business planning standpoint, because we're not just leasing apartments, like you're like taking care of their pets, you're like providing fitness equipment and like amenities like pools, right? Like all the package delivery. And so, yeah, it's actually like a pretty complex financial modeling problem too, as you think about like how do you actually build a budget, with us. And so I think it's made me have a lot of empathy for the managers who are just trying to do a great job, but oftentimes what's happening is they're just being forced to specialize and specialize even more because like technology does a lot of this lifting. And we definitely think that this over reliance on like maybe technology, right, is could really people aren't as generalists as they used to be, which would make them like a really great like budgeter or financial modeler. And so we're always thinking about how to make that experience better in the product. And the other aspect that has made me think about the multifamily industry is that not only has the industry have to provide like all these different services and amenities for the residents, but it's just such a like critical foundation of just like all the things that make cities thrive, from like suburban multifamily apartments to like urban core. There's so many different asset classes that serve this need. Yeah, it's been interesting to see how there's like a lack of like institutional investment in housing in places like Panama, and how important it is to keep the country running, the way that it runs today in the US.
Love that insight.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now let's go on to the next segment. We're getting into life, family, and legacy. We love highlighting not just what founders build, but why they build it. Briant, what drives you personally, and how does family, faith, and your surroundings shape the way you approach entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for me, it's really all about building something that people want. I really do love budgeting. It's something that I love thinking about, and I've been thinking about it for 10 years. I probably have spent thousands and thousands of hours working on this product, and it's honestly just really satisfying to find other people who love budgeting as much as I do. And so I totally nerd out on this topic, as you can tell. But I think what really keeps me sort of going is that I'm able to build something that just impacts people's lives in a positive way. And then that pays dividends for me, both personally, but then also for my family life. Certainly starting a business maybe isn't for everyone. It has its own challenge. It takes up a lot of mental, intellectual space. But if I reflect back on my career in multifamily versus what I'm doing now, I just don't see that there would be a better use of time than what I'm doing today. There's nothing like Ron knows, like, you too, Martin, right? Like putting your name on it, right? When your name is on it, like it means a lot. And so I just feel really blessed, that people like it and that it's working.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And definitely we know that well. So how do you stay grounded when things do get intense? Obviously, we know, that pressure, especially in the startup world. I think personally, it could be, easy to get lost in the grind because it's just your primary focus to that point about putting your name on it. Like you gotta succeed. So
Yeah.
How does that work for you?
Honestly, for me, I just try to stay grounded in the activity and not so much on the outcomes. And for me, it's really about like faith, family, and dirt. I go from working on code to like working on compost, on a regular basis. And so for me, it's really about just staying consistent on the activity, knowing that, look, sometimes like the outcomes aren't entirely in your control. Like I can't control what happens in the multifamily industry if rates go down, if everyone suddenly has a ton of money to buy more deals and they need more budgeting, right? And so I just try to stay focused on solving problems one at a time, and then surrendering, right, to being successful, or not successful. Either way, I think I feel proud of what we built at Vizibly.
Yeah, we're excited to watch you grow too. So looking ahead, what kind of legacy do you want Vizibly and you personally to leave behind in the multifamily industry when it's all said and done?
So one of the things that we get a lot on LinkedIn, when we do a couple of different posts about budgeting, we get a lot of comments that talk about how many events they've sacrificed. There's this lady that comes to mind right now who talked about how she missed her grandson's birthday or her grandson's birth because she was like in a budget. Or another person talked about how their birthday was in September and they never get September off. They've never been able to celebrate their birthday in September. And so I think what motivates me is, giving people their time and trust back into their work so that they can be there for all of those events and moments, And the one thing that happened to me, for example, was I was working really hard. I had a 1-year-old. That was really challenging to balance both being an executive, having like your first newborn baby. And then, 8 months later, the REIT sells, the whole company sold. Everyone went their separate ways. And it almost felt like, man, we worked really hard for it to not really matter, And so that's why I wanted to really focus on making all this whole process easier, because it's a really important process, but also people need to they can't dedicate their whole lives to it, right? And it can't take up 6 months of your life, so people can enjoy some of their time.
That's amazing. Well, you helped sell that REIT, by the way, with I'm sure your budgeting tools back then that you had. So we're getting close to the end. As we wrap up, I want to know what's next for Vizibly. Any upcoming innovations you can share, product releases you're excited about, anything of that nature.
So we're always thinking about how to make the budgeting process better, faster, easier for folks. And so we've got a lot of different ideas on how to make the process even smoother for property managers. That really feels a lot more like TurboTax. So we've got a couple of innovations there. We're always looking at how we can use AI and other kind of techniques to help either pre-fill the budget or explain the budget, do like more financial analysis. And then some other things that we're looking at right now is how to bring in like third-party integrations. So things like market surveys, benchmarking data, all the things that people are doing outside of Vizibly today. We're looking for partnerships to bring that in.
That's huge. So for anyone listening who's considering launching their own prop tech startup, what is one lesson that you've learned that you wish you knew from day one? I know we all have tons, but which one stands out?
The one that stands out to me is that you can automate a lot of things in business, but you can't automate trust. You have to go and meet people, right? You have to go and it can be easy to think about businesses as just like the corporate name, the building, but it's actually just like a collection of people. Right? It's a collection of people who work in certain roles, and you got to go meet them. Like that's what companies are. They're literally groups of people working on a project, right? On a business. And so I think the one thing that I wish I would have known is that sometimes that just takes time to build, and to go slower. Like when we go too fast and it's not working the way it needs to, it can be really easy to like dismiss the whole thing. Maybe no one really wants to buy this. Maybe this whole thing is set to fail. And that can be like a lot of pressure, on someone. But ultimately, like just treat this like an experiment. I try to be now like very like almost emotionally removed, from the outcomes, where it's like, you know what, we're just going to see what works in the multifamily industry as it relates to financial forecasting and planning. Let's go solve some problems, and then whatever comes of it, then, we'll be satisfied with it.
Brian, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I love how you're combining innovation with intention, really building technology that gives people back time to focus on what really matters. And for everyone listening, go check out Vizibly.io. That's Vizibly.io to see how you can simplify your budgeting process and help your team plan smarter, faster, and more collaboratively. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to multifamilypodcast.com and Spotify, Apple, everywhere you can listen to a podcast. And everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Multifamily Podcast powered by apartmentseo.com. Until next time, bye Ron, bye Brian. Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Multifamily Podcast, brought to you by co-founders of Apartment SEO, a premier Google agency, with your hosts, Ron Ruiz and Martin Quinchola. Join us again next time as we continue to bring you the latest and greatest in the multifamily industry.